The date is June 11th, 2024. The interviewee is Dorothea Scher. The interviewer is Paula Treef. This is being done in New York, New York, and the language is in English. Hi. Please state your name.
Dorothea H. Scher.
And could you tell me your name at birth? Your name at birth.
My name at birth was Eva Dorothea Ernestina Manuela Hauptmann.
And can you spell the last name there? Can you spell the last name?
Hauptmann.
Thank you. And when were you born?
July 14th, 1933.
And that makes your current age. What is your current age?
My parents' age?
Your current age.
Oh, my current age. Do I have to say? 90.
Or else we'll do the math. So, and in what city and country were you born?
Vienna, Austria.
Thank you. And could you tell me some about your family? Your father's name? What was his name?
Kurt Hauptmann, Hauptmann.
And your mother?
Anne Hoffman, Hoffmann.
That was her maiden name, Hoffman, right? And did they have any brothers or sisters, do you know?
My mother had a sister who died in her 20s in 1927 or something. And my father had 5 sisters. And they called him the Count because they were so pleased to have a boy in the family.
Do you know their names, his sisters' names?
Mitzi, I can't think of the others. Mitzi, Betty.
That's fine. And what did your parents do? What did your father do?
My father, he lived off my mother.
Meaning?
My grandfather sent him to law school. But then he was kicked out of the legal profession for being dishonest.
Oh, my goodness.
And when he came over here, he had a little shoe factory. And that's what he did.
When he came
But
here
I
to
think
the
most of
United
his
States.
living was made by his awful second wife, who was a bridge shark. She made lots of money playing bridge.
You're talking about when he came to the United States.
Yeah.
So you said he lived off your mother. Did your mother work, or she?
No, she had money.
She had money. She had inherited wealth. So okay. So I'm going to ask you first to start with some questions about your early childhood. I know that you were young when the war started, so we just wanted to know the things that you remember and maybe even some things that you were told.
Oh, I do. I remember very well March 17th or 21st or something when the Nazis or Hitler came into Austria.
Okay.
I mean, he was Austrian, but he had been in Germany.
Okay, before we talk about that, though, I really just want to get a sense of your life before the Nazis came into Austria, just what it was like to live in Vienna at that time for a little girl. And you said that you grew up in Vienna. You were born in Vienna and you grew
Yes,
up
I
in
had
Vienna.
dance lessons. I had English lessons.
Was your family was like well-to-do?
Yeah.
So can you describe kind of did you go to school then before the war, or?
Well, I didn't go to school because I was 4.
Because you were young.
And then we left in September of 39 when I was 6, when I would have gone to school, but
Okay, so
I
not
came to
actually
school here.
So your family was kind of upper class. Were you raised in a Jewish household? Were you raised in a Jewish household?
No.
So tell me a little about that.
My mother detested the Old Testament, and she would never have it in the house. We only had the New Testament.
Oh, so you have the New Testament.
And she liked the Episcopal Church. She had me baptized when I was 4 in Vienna.
So she was drawn to the Episcopal Church. It wasn't, sometimes children are baptized in Europe at that time, partly to kind of hide their Jewishness.
Yeah, well, that too, but
But she was drawn to the Episcopal Church.
she was.
And was she an Episcopalian as well, or she just?
No,
had you
they were
baptized?
all Jewish. But my mother was the only child in Vienna when she was in grammar school that insisted there was a law that you had to take a class in your religion. which was Jewish in her case. But she hated the Old Testament, so she was the only child in Vienna who also took Episcopal lessons.
Episcopal education. So she was drawn to that very early, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And so she had you
Well
baptized.
before the whole Hitler thing. You know.
Yeah. And your home then was was an Episcopalian home, even though your parents were both Jewish. Did they celebrate any Jewish
Well,
customs?
we had Christmas trees and the whole thing.
And did you have any Jewish traditions? Passover Seder's?
No.
Nothing at all.
No, they weren't very religious at all.
Okay. But they totally not identified as being Jewish. And
No.
your dad too? Your father too?
Maybe he a little more, but he had disappeared from my life for 4 years.
When was that?
Well, he left Vienna in 39 or something,
Okay.
38, and went to Rome. And we lost touch with him, and I didn't see him till I was 8. So that was quite a break between being 4 and being 8,
Uh-huh.
not seeing my father.
Yeah, that is.
But we were close after that.
Given that you were raised as Episcopalian, did you have any contact with the Jewish community? Did you have any sense of what the Jewish community life was like in the Jewish community at
No.
that time in Vienna?
My nanny used to take me to Catholic church.
Okay, all right. So really not connected to that at all. So you're talking about your parents. Can you given what you've just said about your dad, can you tell me what your first memory is of your father? Maybe your strongest memory?
Well, excuse me. My mother came to me one day when I was 4 and said, "Your father's moving out." And I said, "So?" Because I hadn't seen him that much anyhow.
Oh, even in the earlier years,
Yeah.
you hadn't seen him. He wasn't there.
Well, he was there on occasion, but
He wasn't much a part of your life.
no. And then he became more of my life in a way when he moved out. And
How was
he
that?
would always pick me up and take me out on Sundays and
Oh.
continued to do that in the United States.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you said that you kind of got back together back in the
Yeah.
United States. So during your early years of him, your memories were good memories, but not a lot of memories. Is that what you're saying?
No, enough memories, yeah.
And what was he like as a person, your dad?
He was good looking. He was smart. But he was, not a great character, he's living off my mother more or less.
Uh-huh.
So, but she put him through law school. And then when he came over here, he couldn't be a lawyer because he couldn't pass the thing. And he had this little shoe business that I think I mentioned.
His little what? I'm sorry.
Shoe.
Oh, shoe business. Yes. Right. And what about your mom? What are your earliest memories of her?
But being the kind of upper class child I was sort of more attached to my nannies because, the parents were always off doing things. And that's not just me, that's the way it was.
That's the way it was with those kinds of homes.
However, I do have a friend. We were in kindergarten at the age of 3, and we found each other here and reintroduced our parents when we were 6 or 7. And she's still a great friend of mine today.
You found each other when you came to the United States? Yeah. Wow. So you don't have a lot of memories, early memories of your mom until you kind of came to the United States because you were connected to your nannies. That's what you're saying.
Well,
She was there.
she was beautiful, and she was very beautiful.
Yeah.
She had blonde hair and amber eyes.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, I do remember 2 friends of hers were at our apartment one day, and she'd left the room, and they looked at me and they said, "Little brown-haired child, she's no beauty like her mother." And I said to myself, what a stupid thing to say in front of a 4-year-old.
Wow. And how about your grandparents? Did you have any connection to them, again, before the war?
Well, my father's father, I think, had died before I was born. I remember his mother, and she went off to Israel, or Palestine as it was called, with the war. And then they brought her over here
Mm-hmm.
because my father had all these sisters and they kind of took care of her. But she was not ever really a part of my life. She was quite foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very attached to my maternal grandmother. Very.
What was her name?
Frederica Fritzi.
Frederica Hoffman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
Muller was her maiden name.
And you were connected to her when you were little, even before the war. You're saying you were very attached to her.
Mm-hmm.
So she was a significant person in your
Mhm,
life. What was she like as a person?
Just kind and giving, and she had a terrible marriage. My grandfather was a beast, and she was just a lovely person.
And she was very attached to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wonderful.
I was the only grandchild because my mother's sister died before she had any children, so I was it.
So you were living this upper class Episcopalian life in Vienna, and when did things start to change in terms of the political situation?
Well, I do remember when the Nazis came into Vienna, I looked out my bedroom window and suddenly there were swastika flags all along the street. And things became, pretty ugly.
In what way did they become pretty ugly?
Well, I saw some kids chasing a Jewish boy, and and then the Gestapo came to our apartment and said, "You've got 10 minutes to leave." So my mother grabbed a few things, and we left and went to my grandmother's large apartment. And the way this worked was they'd come in and take everything, and you'd come back to an empty apartment. Well, and you had to do all this paperwork to get back, and the Nazis loved paperwork, so they'd get all this work done to get back into your apartment. Well, lo and behold, they hadn't gotten around to taking a teacup even. So my mother had it loaded into a moving van to send to the United States, and guess what? The truck caught fire.
So you're putting up your in quotes, meaning you don't believe that it caught fire.
No,
Huh.
because our dining set had been in a famous Parisian furniture fair or modern art fair in Paris in 1925. So we had valuable things and paintings, kokoschkas,
So when they said you had 10 minutes to leave, so let's go back a sec. The Nazis came into Vienna. What do you remember of the greeting that the Nazis got, or what do you remember of the reaction of the Viennese people, the Austrian people?
Well, of course I remember them, seeing Hitler, as I told you, and everybody going, yay.
Yeah, so you didn't tell us about seeing Hitler for the interview. Could you tell us some about that? About seeing Hitler?
Well, I saw him, and, I was in this crowd. I mean, the crowd was as though my nanny and I were like on 6th Avenue, and he was on 5th. That's how big the crowd was, a whole block of people going, yay. And, just, and as I said earlier, people forget he was Austrian after all.
Yeah, yeah. So there were throngs of people welcoming him. That's
Of course.
what you're saying.
Well, not Jewish people,
Not
but
Jewish people. Do you remember, how did you understand? You were just a little kid, so for you it was a big parade. Did you have any understanding of what this
Not
could
really,
mean?
no.
Or was it scary in any way?
No.
Coming?
No. But then after that, like when you went into a store, instead of saying good morning or hello, you'd say Heil Hitler.
So that was an everyday kind of change. Were there other everyday changes that you remember?
Well, that's about it, I think.
And so you were in Vienna for about how long before you left? When the Nazis
About
came in?
18 months.
So 18 months of after the Nazis came in, and you saw these little changes, like you had to say Heil Hitler, and you said that you saw some people chasing after Jewish boys. Because you were raised Episcopalian and you weren't Jewish, Was that
Well,
seem
it wasn't
threatening
a
in any
big
way?
thing, you know. It just was, I wasn't being taken to temples or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I may have said, my nanny used to take me to St. Stephan's, which is the big Catholic church in Vienna.
And so when the Gestapo came in and said you had 10 minutes to leave, they were saying we're going to take all your stuff. That was just before you actually were leaving Vienna?
Oh, yeah.
That was at the end of those 18
Oh,
months?
we didn't leave for another 6 months or so.
Oh, okay.
And if we didn't have the black sheep of the family, my grandfather's brother, who was sort of a failure, and what did you do when you had that kind of person? You sent them to the United States to get rid of them. And so they sent my Uncle Oscar, my grandfather's younger brother, to the United States. And actually, that's how we got here, because you needed to have a visa. Mm-hmm. So a good thing he was a no-goodnik.
So when you left your apartment, you were with your grandmother? You were staying with her for those 18 months or so, or it was less than 18 months?
Oh, no, just a few
Sure.
weeks.
Just a little bit of time. And during that time, your mother was already trying to get a visa to leave?
Of course, yeah.
So do you know like when she started that process? Or how,
No.
anything about how that went?
I can't.
But you know that it involved this Uncle Oscar who needed to sponsor you.
Mm-hmm.
And the sponsoring was for you, your mother, you had no siblings, right? And your grandparents or just your grandmother?
Well, my grandfather had business associates in Switzerland, so they went to Switzerland for a couple of years. They lived in Basel.
During the war?
Yeah. And then somehow they got to come over here.
I see. So you were just going with your mother to come to the United States. How did that feel? Do you remember how that felt? Was it exciting? I'm going to the United States.
Yeah, it was exciting. And, I remember the train trip from Vienna to Trieste where we caught the boat ship. And
tell me about that, about the train trip.
Well, we're on the train. I loved it, kids, trains. And we saw the Alps. And my mother said, take a good look because I don't think you're going to be seeing those again. We went to Trieste, got a ship, which went all the way around the boot to Genoa, and then to Lisbon, and then here.
And did you get off in Genoa or Lisbon at all?
Yeah.
I mean, get off like to stay there for a little while, or just
Just for hours.
For a few hours.
But walked around.
Yeah, but you didn't stay in any other
No.
country or anything like that. So, and the boat trip, what was that like?
Fun, except I got seasick, but I loved it anyhow.
What did you do? How long did it take back then to take a boat?
It took 2 weeks, I think.
And what did
Because
you?
it went all around the boot and then to Lisbon and then here. Yeah, because I remember we got here October 2nd and we'd left, I think, September 15th or something like that.
So some of this felt like an adventure, you're saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't like to be a kid on a boat and run around and be independent?
Yeah. And it was just you and your mother. Your nannies weren't there. So you had to say goodbye to them. Was that difficult or?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. You were safe with your mom, so you felt safe. So you land in the United States, and what happens then?
And we were met by my Uncle Oscar and his son. Ruddy. He and his family lived in Yonkers.
Take some water, it's fine.
And they sent me to live with them for 3 months.
Just by yourself?
I had already had English lessons in Vienna, so, I forgot my German like overnight. And I loved my cousins. The boy was 8 and the girl was 10, and I was 6. And I enjoyed my time there. It was the first time I went to real school. I went to first grade.
So when you came here, you already spoke a little English, or you spoke
Oh, yeah.
English quite well?
Quite well.
Oh, quite well. So you didn't have that transition. And you went right to school, or? And again, you kind of spoke English well, so that
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
wasn't too difficult. It was just you with your uncle Oscar and cousins, or
Yeah.
your mother wasn't
Oh,
there.
well, I was with Uncle Oscar's son and his wife in Yonkers,
Oh, okay.
and that's where I went to kindergarten, and then when I came back to live with my mother in Manhattan, I entered first grade.
I see. So where was your mother when you were with your? What was your uncle Oscar's son's name? Do you know?
His son,
Yeah, the people. You lived
Rudyard.
with. Oh, that was Rudyard.
He loved Kipling.
It's an unusual name for sure. So that was Rudyard that you lived with, and he had children like that were around your age.
Well, I was 6, the boy was 8, and the girl was 10, and the boy and I just loved each other to death.
Huh.
And speaking of that, he unfortunately died of throat cancer when he was 13,
Oh.
which was one of the big heartbreaks of my life because we were very close.
What was his name?
Herman, but he was called Sonny.
So, your mother wasn't there. Where was she during this time?
She was trying to find work and a place to live, and she, what upper class women could do was sew, embroider. So she got work in the garment district.
And that's when you were able to go live with her. So, were you aware what was happening in Europe during this time? Because when you're here and kind of forging a new life, that's when things were
No,
really.
what I do remember,
transformed.
I was living with my grandparents on Madison Square, as a matter of fact, for a short time when I came back from Yonkers, because my mother was living in a furnished room, and they had a little apartment. And
So these are your grandparents who came from Switzerland, who had gone to Switzerland before the war, and then they came to the United States. Your mother's parents,
they went to Switzerland and then came
and
here.
they came
Yeah,
here. So you were living with them. You were saying.
for I don't know, 8, 9 months, something like that. And now torn down Madison Square Hotel, they had a little apartment. And
I was asking you whether you were aware of what was going on in Europe, if there were stories that were coming out.
well,
or-
a little bit, but I was really frightened when Pearl Harbor happened, because then I thought, oh no, we're going to be overrun again, as we had been in Austria. Of
So you
course,
had
that
memory-
didn't happen.
Yeah, so you had memories of that, of being kind of invaded, and that was scary for you. And was your father here already then too?
Well, he had disappeared from our lives for
Right.
a while, and my grandfather found him. I don't think he found us. And I finally became reunited with him when I was 8. So I hadn't seen him half my life.
Yeah, yeah.
But he was very fond of me, and
But he also was able to come to the United States. Do you know how he came?
no, I have no idea.
Okay. So I was asking about whether there was an awareness of the war, and you said you heard about Pearl Harbor. Did your parents or your grandparents or your mom talk at all about, because they had family and friends that were still in Europe, did they talk at all about what was going
Not that I
on?
remember.
Not even later?
No,
No.
yeah. I think they just said, let's get on with it,
Kind of looking forward. But your father also had 5 sisters.
Mhm.
Do you know what happened to them? Well, some were in Palestine.
One went to Palestine, now Israel, and the other 4 came here. One lived in Scranton, one lived in Queens, another one lived in Queens or Brooklyn. I don't know.
You didn't have a relationship with
I
them.
did with the youngest one, Aunt Mitzi, and she used to take me to the circus
She was here in New York? Or?
in Brooklyn or Queens or something.
So you had a little bit of an extended family, but not much, small family. But all of the family were able to get out before the war. It sounds like.
Well, before the war here,
Yeah,
but not before the war there, because that was in 39,
right.
and by 41 they were all here.
Oh, okay. So in the early stages of the
Yeah.
war, right? Early stages of the war. Okay, and so you went to school, regular public school, and tell me a little bit about your education here.
Well, I started off in Yonkers because I was living with the cousins. And then I went to 6 schools by the time I was 13. And I got very good marks, I will say.
Is that just because you're changing homes?
Yeah. My mother kept moving around to rooms, and we didn't have a real apartment until 1945. So that was almost 6 years that we were in rooms, which they don't have much of that anymore, I don't think. But
that meant that you would change
end of
schools.
The Depression, and people lived in a different way and had different expectations than we all do now.
Yeah. Was that difficult for you going to different schools, or did you kind of just
Well,
go forward?
I didn't love it, but I did pretty well. So
You got good grades, you said.
I liked school. I didn't like changing all the time, but I liked school.
And did anyone during those early years, I mean, again, you're in the United States during the war, after the war, did they ask you like where you were from, or was the history a part of your life at all? The fact that you've been in Vienna, that you just escaped?
Not that I remember. Probably they did, but
Okay, but it didn't impact you. You didn't feel like it impacted you. So you went to 6 schools in whatever number of years, and then high school.
I still have my report cards in there.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember you had good grades. And then what did you end up? Did you go to college, or what did you end up doing?
I went to Smith in Northampton, Massachusetts, for a couple of years. And then my father said he couldn't afford to send me there anymore, but I could go to Barnard. And to me, college was going away. So I said, forget it. By that time, I knew I was going to marry the man I married. And I said, I'll just go to work. And I went to work at Time Life, and I absolutely loved it. So
What kind of work did you do?
I was just secretarial work, but I loved it.
And you had already met your husband then.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that a little bit. How did you meet him?
We met at Riverdale Country School, where my father sent me. I was there in 7th grade, I think, or 8th grade. And then he said he couldn't afford to send me anymore. And I went to an all-girls public school, high school up in Inwood. And I sort of liked that, and it was nice. But then they closed that down and moved us to George Washington High, which is still the big high school up in Washington Heights. And it was a nightmare. So I told my father I was going to commit suicide if he didn't send me back to private school, and he did.
Were you serious? Were you that depressed? Or that was more like a get me out of here?
Half and half. I mean, I was miserable.
Why was that?
I mean, there were boys pummeling each other in the hallways, and police cops were in the underground station and the subway station when school let out. It was not a nice place, and I don't think it's a nice place today.
So pretty scary. So he sent you back to the private school. And you said you met your husband there, and you, so like when you were in 7th grade, or
No, probably 10th or 11th,
Oh, wow.
something like that.
and you dated from then on? So real childhood sweethearts here.
Pardon?
Real childhood sweethearts.
Didn't last.
When did you get married then?
1955.
And was he Jewish or Episcopalian or?
His mother was Catholic and his father was Jewish. But his father was not at all religious. And his mother went to Mass, but she didn't try to, I think, inculcate them. He had an older brother.
So it wasn't. He wasn't from a religious home. You're saying. And at that point, how did you identify yourself? Did you identify yourself as Episcopalian, Jewish, neither?
Episcopalian, because my mother was into that.
Right.
And, took me to church. I finally got married at the little church around the corner, and I was a communicant there for years. until I decided I wasn't that religious.
So that's your identity now, though, as Episcopalian?
Hmm. Yeah, and my girls went to Grace Church School, which was Episcopal, and the grammar school, and then they went uptown to private school.
So they're also Episcopalian or Christians. So looking, does your Jewish kind of roots, I guess I would say, does that play any role in your life, or has it played any role in your
No,
life?
because I said my mother absolutely despised the religion.
Yeah, but it's not something that even as you yourself have moved into adulthood, etc. It's not really a factor in your life. That's what
No.
you're saying.
No,
Yeah.
I wasn't brought up that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you have children. They're not children anymore. So could you tell us about their names and ages?
Pardon?
You tell me their names and ages.
Deirdre, the older one, brown hair. I don't know. She was born in 57, whatever that makes her.
Okay.
60 something. And 2 years younger is Pamela.
And they're
She was born in 59.
okay. And they're married
Uh,
or were
No, they're not married. Pamela, the younger one, is separated. And Deirdre, the older one, is gay, and she left her husband. But I'm very close to him, and he's close to me. So they have 2 children, and Pamela has 2 girls. So
and what are your grandchildren's names?
Deirdre's are Natalie and Nick, and Pamela's are Sydney and Nina.
Okay. Have you ever talked to your daughters about your experiences in Vienna and in these kind of early experiences?
I don't think so.
So it's not,
I could be mistaken, but
it's not it seems like it's not a big part of your identity.
No.
Really.
I mean, I came here and I became American.
Yeah, and your family is American, and you're well rooted, and that's great. Have you ever been back to Austria?
Yes. Actually, I was just there in September. And I think I was there 2 other times. I don't have any great attachment to it.
Do you feel any special connection to it because it's do you feel any special connection to it?
No,
or
I don't. I mean,
it could be the
my
opposite.
special connection is to Paris.
Is to Paris?
I go almost every year.
Just because it's such a beautiful city, or because
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And I like to eat.
And there's good restaurants in Paris for sure. When you did learn about what had happened during the war to the Jews,
Well, I mean, I knew what was happening during the war. We knew about concentration camps and all that.
when did you become aware of that?
Then, I mean, in fact, my mother had a cousin who was sent to Dachau, which was one of the camps. And in those days, like the late 30s or whatever, you could pay your way out or whatever. And he came out. And he was my favorite cousin. And I almost didn't recognize him. And he'd only been there 6 months.
This was when you were still living in Vienna, you mean? When you say you didn't recognize him, what do you mean? What did he look like?
Well, he had aged so and thinned out and, But he did all right. He went to Australia and had a nice life. So,
So you knew about it then, but certainly when you came to the United States, and certainly as you grew yourself, you learned much more. We all learned more about some of the details. Did that feel like that had any kind of personal connection for you, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel all those things more than you would read it in the papers. I mean, I've lived through some of it,
So when you say you feel all those things, what is it that you feel?
Well, I find it quite horrifying what people can do to people, and they're still doing it today in different parts of the world. It just never ends.
Yeah. But you feel that since you kind of were there, you were there, not kind of, since you were there, that gives you a different view in some ways, a little bit, versus reading about it. Is that right? Am I overstating this, or
That I'd
is that seem right, or
what?
that since it was part of your life,
Yeah.
that somehow it gives you a different viewpoint?
Yes, it does. I mean, I think it gives me a greater appreciation of freedom. And I remember Senator McCarthy came and spoke in college, and everybody kind of booed him. You know, he was a terrible guy.
Because of they booed him because he was a terrible guy. I mean, you were saying something about that it gives you a more appreciation for freedom.
Yeah,
Tell me more. Can you tell me more about that?
I can't remember, but
No, I mean what you meant when you said it gives you more of an appreciation for freedom.
well, I mean, as I said, I can't go any further with that. I just appreciated being here and being in a free country. And
Okay, kind of rescued yourself. Do you think that your experience had any effect on how you raised your children or on your relationships?
could be, but I can't judge that.
It's not something that comes to mind. Okay. So, I guess a couple more questions, really. Why did you decide now to do this interview?
Because you asked me.
No, you had to sign up for it, so that it's something that you.
Well, I guess to go over that history so it wouldn't be forgotten.
Because it's important.
Yeah.
You're saying.
Yeah.
Is there a message you'd like future generations to take from your story?
Not from my story, but from history. From, excuse me, I'm going to go to the clinic, as I said, as soon as you leave. No, I think people should remember or be taught. Obviously, you're too young to have been there, but I think you should know about it because, you know, it happened in Vietnam and in China and what Japan did in China during the Second World War, horrible things.
You think it's important to remember the past, not just the Holocaust, but
Yeah.
these stories do repeat
Man's
themselves.
inhumanity to man.
Right, man's inhumanity to man, right. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't kind of touched on?
No, except, which I think came out of this talk, that I appreciate freedom and this country and the ability to speak up if you want to.
We all need to appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some people, I mean, probably most people take it all for granted. You know, they're born here, they go to school, they go to college, they get married. But I have a different view of it because I know how it can be much harder than that.
And how we can all lose it. Very not that hard to lose it, to
No.
lose our freedoms. So, okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you sharing your story, and
Well, I hope it does some good because it doesn't, you know, it just seems like my story, not all that fascinating, but
well, you actually have been through a lot, and I appreciate your willingness to share it. Because I agree with you. I think we need to remember, and we
do
need
people
to pay
turn you
attention.
down?
I don't know. I'm the so. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And my pleasure. I hope it does some good.